For a while there, I did not realize anyone was out there, and I thought that we were not that waiting for quorum. So we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. Who would like to lead it today? Would you like to lead it, please? Okay, Mike. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, why don't we start with introductions? You want to start, Michael?
Michael Dowgelli, East County Paratransit user.
Kim Ridgway, AC Transit.
Pello Smith, East Valley, live in Antioch, California.
Deanna Perry.
Belinda Graham, City of San Pablo.
Lisa Hammond, Choice in Aging.
Mary runs the Advisory Council on Aging and the La Miranda Spirit Band program.
Lori Reese Brown, City of Richmond.
I'm Vi Ibarra with the Developmental Disabilities Council for Contra Costa County.
I'm sorry, I didn't get everyone's name on this side. I wasn't fast enough. So if I could just get your first names.
I'm Belinda. And Bridget.
Yeah, please.
Vi, and next to me is Bill.
Next, we should go to the other people in the room, starting out with staff.
Firdaus Jahan, CCTA.
Terry Ann Grover, CCTA.
And
Peter
then
Engel will be back.
Pardon?
Peter Engel is
yes.
also here.
I think we all know Peter. And then we'll now go to the audience. Somebody spoke, but I couldn't hear what they said. And
It is on? Oh. Beverly.
oh, that's better.
Joanna Pollock.
Beverly.
Aaron Reese.
Peter Engel.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. So the next item on the agenda is public comments, which is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Are there any? None. Okay. So we'll move on to the item number 1, the roster. Peter, do you want to say anything about it? No? Any questions?
We were informed today or yesterday that Sharon Chechki will be resigning from the PCC, and she's our vice chair. So next month we will agendize to elect a new vice chair. Is that what I needed to say?
Okay. Anything else? Okay. We will then move on to the calendar, which is attached in your packet. What page is that? Is that the next item, maybe? It is. On page 2-1. Any questions about the calendar? So we have 2 more meetings of this committee. 3 more. So we're meeting all 3 months remaining in our calendar, in our operating year. Okay. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong committee. Wait a minute. I thought that was. So we're meeting in May. Is all. May 20th. Okay. So with that, we'll go to item number 3, which is approval of the summary of actions from November 19th, which I believe was our last meeting. Any comments there? Does anybody want to make a motion? Yes.
I'll
Kim.
move to approve.
Okay. There's a motion to approve in a second. Any comments? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is item number 4, which is the FPPC Form 700, and we have some speakers. Terry Ann, are you going to do this item?
Hi, I'm Terry Ann Grover again, the clerk of the board for the authority, and today I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the Form 700 filing process and then the ethics training as mandated by Assembly Bill 1234. So I'll go ahead and start off with the Form 700s. The Political Reform Act requires the authority to adopt a conflict of interest code that establishes the rules for reporting personal assets and designate all agency positions that participate in the decision-making process. A conflict occurs when a member makes a decision that affects their personal assets or in which they may have a financial interest. So an example for this committee is voting on a recommendation for a contract where your spouse is an employee of the contractor. It is not a conflict to vote on an annual paratransit allocation where the PCC member is a writer or representative. In 2014, we adopted an ordinance that added all of the committees here, including the Paratransit Coordinating Council, as a designated position that was required to file a Form 700. As a committee member, you're required to file because you regularly advise the board and staff on issues that affect paratransit in the county. You review and prioritize paratransit funding applications as requested by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. You serve as a forum for paratransit service providers, and you promote the development and coordination of a comprehensive integrated paratransit system, in addition to performing all other paratransit duties that may be assigned by the authority. The filing requirement is an assuming office form that is required within 30 days of being appointed, annually on April 1st or the following Monday. This year it's on April 2nd because the Fair Political Practices Commission is recognizing Cesar Chavez Day. And then there's also a leaving office form requirement within 30 days of leaving office. So it's very important that when you do resign or leave office that you provide Fifi with a home email address or contact information so that we can get that Form 700 filing. You do report on the previous 12 months for the annual and then the previous 12 months for when you're assuming or leaving office. You do have to report whether you have anything to report or not. And if you have any questions on what you're supposed to report, you can contact the Fair Political Practices Commission, and they have an advice line that's very helpful and responsive. They can charge a penalty of up to $10 per day and up to $100 if the non-compliance of the filing is reported to the Fair Political Practices Commission. In 2017, we did implement an electronic filing system through NetFile. The only way to file electronically is through that system. The only other way is to file an original hard copy with a wet signature. An annual statement went out notifying you of that requirement on February 6th, and there's been reminders every 3 weeks from that date. This is the third year in a row, so hopefully I know majority of our members have switched over to filing electronically. And the nice thing about that is that it does retain your information in the system, so you don't have to go hunt down what you filed last year. It stays in there, and you just update anything that's changed in the prior 12 months. So as part of that annual filing, it gives you the link and tells you where to go to file. It provides new information for new filers, and it provides an option for you to also reset your password if you forgot it in the past year. So with that, do you have any questions on the Form 700 filing part of it? Okay. So the other requirement of being a member is ethics training. That is required by the authority under Assembly Bill 1234, and it requires local officials to receive at least 2 hours of ethics training within 6 months of being appointed, and then every 2 years thereafter. The Fair Political Practices Commission does provide an online free 2-hour training. You do want to make sure, because they do have a local and a state ethics training, that you use the local ethics training, because the state training does not meet your requirement. So when you go to their website, just make sure that you use the local, and Feardos is good about sending out that exact link that will go to the local. The training focuses on establishing and maintaining public trust, and that the representative of the authority acts with integrity, economy, fiscal prudence, and in a manner that retains and inspires the trust and confidence of the people that we serve. At the completion of the training, a certificate is provided, which you need to sign, and then email it to Feardos. We don't need an original copy, so an email is fine. So for the Form 700s, you'll work with me as the clerk of the board, and for the ethics training, you work with Feardos, Jahan, next to me here. So that's it. If you have any questions on the ethics training, let me know.
Yes. Kim?
Thank you. If an individual is on a committee where they've taken ethics training, not the online, but in a group, and they have a certificate, then they can just go ahead and submit that directly to you, correct?
Correct, yeah. They're good for 2 years, whether you take online or through a training provided by your employer or another committee. You just want to make sure that it's the local and not the state.
Right.
So that's,
okay.
yeah, that's the only caveat. But yeah, as long as it's good for 2 years.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for helping us.
You're welcome.
And so they would just mail it to the authority when they do it, if they do it that way?
It can just be emailed.
Emailed? Okay.
For the certificate for the ethics training?
Okay.
Yeah. Are you referring to the Form 700 or the ethics training?
Well, I'm
certificate?
just thinking about for the kind where the ethics, I think, is what I was really wondering.
Okay.
If you do it in a classroom setting, then you end up with a piece of paper. And so then you have to take a picture of it or something and send it?
Yeah, you can either scan it and email it to us. If you have a good picture of it, we can take a picture, or you can mail it to us or bring a hard copy at a committee meeting.
Okay, but we could use our cell phone, for example, take a picture.
I've gotten some of those. They're not the best quality, but if it's fairly good quality, they're acceptable.
Okay.
As long as it shows the name, who provided it, the date, and has a signature.
Okay. Is everybody clear, or are there more questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And, okay, so now we're ready for item number 5, which is the City of Richmond's fiscal year 17-18 Measure J, Program 15 claim approval.
Madam Chair, I wonder if, based on the subcommittee's discussion today, and you can discuss this as a committee if you want to do this, is that we do item 6 first, which is an update from the City of Richmond, our transit, and it might put...
That would be great.
It might put a little bit more perspective into the discussion on item 5.
Okay, is that okay with the committee? Okay, so let's go to item 6, the City of Richmond's Our Transit update. I think we're all interested in that. So I'll turn it over to the City of Richmond to present. Is that you, Lori?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Okay. So what you have in front of you, in this, if you don't have it now, it's coming.
It's coming.
What you have is the LIFT program, the City of Richmond's contract with LIFT, and how this program is beginning to roll out. It's a long time coming, of course, but we had to put a lot of things in place. It included an extensive, kind of detailed contract with LIFT, and we had to go back and forth through our various, our city attorney's office and then their attorneys to make sure that the contract covered all of the things that were, or included all of the things that the Measure J program would cover, especially Title VI and anything that we were currently operating under, just to make sure we have more an efficient service. This first form you see here is how the service works with Lyft. This is just a program overview that our clients are receiving now. We're actually going through a travel training program with our clients now, the existing ones. Any new clients that we have, it's really easier for our new clients to understand because we're able to kind of, they've never been a part of Paratransit before or the program, so it's easy to kind of give these items to them, let them know that you're in need of this, and you need a smartphone, you need these type of items in order to be able to use the service. But for our existing clients, I think that's where our real challenge is because they're used to service a certain way, and so now they have to get acclimated to a new service, a new way of thinking and doing things. And so I think that's one reason as to why we have not taken off so fast, because we want to make sure that our existing clients really feel comfortable with switching into this new service. We do start them off with the program overview. And this program overview tells you how to access the Lyft app. And in accessing that, you do need a smartphone. And some of our seniors have said that, well, we don't have smartphones. How do we get a smartphone if we don't, how do we get the services if we don't have smartphones? And one of my staff, Misha Carr, she was able to tap into a resource to help seniors who are low income. You have to meet the qualifying, definitions of low income. And, you have to be on Medicaid or Medi-Cal, and you have to have a certain, be in a certain income bracket to qualify for a free smartphone. The other clients who are not necessarily in that income bracket, they either already have a smartphone or they're willing to get one. So that helps us a lot in terms of, because, the disadvantage of this, I would say, if I had to name any cons to this, is that when you go to a new service like that, like this, and you transition, it does take, it's a learning curve, even for our staff as well as it is for our clients. And one of those learning curves for us has been, okay, we want to make sure that all of our seniors, all of our disabled are able to qualify for this service, that we can meet all of their needs. I know that I received some, I'll give you an example. I received some calls from one of the hearing impaired or visually impaired. And we didn't think about the visually impaired or the hearing impaired. And so we said, that is a thought. We didn't put any consideration into that. So I told them we'll go ahead and handle our wheelchair clients as well as the hearing and visually impaired. We'll continue to offer that service at the city staff level. So there may be some other things that come out of this. But right now, it's like I said, it's a learning curve for us. We may have to make some adjustments as we move forward. I don't see that not happening. I think with any transitional program, there are adjustments that have to be made sometimes. But I think that overall, we're going to get something out better than what we had before. And what we had before were the lack of drivers. People were out on disability. People were not showing up to work. With the Lyft program, we'll have drivers, accessible drivers, and we'll have, and our clients can use this 24/7. We didn't have that before. They'll have a 24/7 service. They'll have the opportunity to travel outside of our service area. We've just extended our service area to the Martinez area, the regional hospital out there, as well as the Veterans Hospital. So these are all things that we excuse me, I'm sorry. All things that we're sharing with our clients and how they can get prepared for this. Now, one thing that we are doing now, we're setting up a series of workshops, travel training workshops. We have nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations that have we've just contracted out with, and they're going to help us and assist us with outreach to all of our new and existing clients. And so they'll be able to handle the travel training, things for us in terms of like really reaching out to our population of seniors and disabled, and then kind of working with them one-on-one to give them, to help them feel more, really good about this service and to answer any questions they have, help them. And some people don't even know how to use a smartphone if you ever had one, right? So I'm not saying that you, but if you never had a smartphone, you may not be familiar with how to upload or the app, the Lyft app, and how to use the Lyft app. These are all the services that we will be assisting with. And then right here is just it's another application. It's just a survey application that kind of gives us an idea of, the clients who would be interested in using Lyft, if they currently have or use a ride-sharing service, if they have a smartphone. This helps us to be able to tabulate, who's receiving the service, who's more, application-friendly, who's more tech-savvy, and just wanting them to feel really comfortable with the service itself. So where are we with the process? The process is that most of our existing clients already have been informed, especially the ones who take, who ride on a regular basis, they've been informed of the shift from the Paratransit service to Lyft. And so what we're doing now is just assuring that, that they feel comfortable. Oh, and the question was asked earlier in our subcommittee meeting, whether or not the I think it's like the seniors feel, put a question on. I'm sorry, I just can't, when you're sick, you can't think of everything. But it'll probably come back to mind later. I'm sorry. So, any questions?
Go ahead.
So these vehicles, are any of them accessible for wheelchairs when you cannot transfer out?
The Lyft vehicles? You mean with
your new program?
Our new program. No, and that's why we're going to still keep in place our, staff program. Our city enrichment program. We're going to still offer a separate service for our wheelchair clients, our visually impaired, and our hearing impaired. Mm-hmm.
I think Michael was next, and then Lisa.
This is just going to be a commenting question. If I was a resident of your service area, there are two things that I would bring to your attention, but I'm not, so I'm going to use this forum for that. Number one, there are reasons other than financial that people choose not to have smartphones, and it has to do with internet security and stalking by using the phone system. That eliminates those people from being able to use that service. Okay, but that's a problem with Lyft in general, is that you have to have the app and you have to have the smartphone. But it's just a comment I wanted to bring up. Secondly, when you're dealing with Lyft, I've heard some people complain that they charge you from the point that the driver leaves their location as opposed to where you are. My understanding is that Tri-Delta has contracted with Lyft that they're not allowed to do that with Tri-Delta service. What is your opinion about how that's going to work in your situation?
Well, this is one reason as to why we went back and forth with the attorneys, both the city attorney and Lyft's attorneys, because we want to make sure that if we tell our clients $3 for one-way trips and that we would subsidize up to $17 one way, we wanted to ensure that that's what would be the actual price. And, because what we did see when we explored Lyft's app was that, okay, if you leave from point A and you arrive at point B, it exceeds over $3. So how does that really work? And so we went back and forth, and so they finally has settled on within their service area. Anywhere you go in the service area, with the exception of Martinez, it would be $3. So that was one thing we really had to kind of work through, because we were thinking that, we didn't know this before, you didn't tell us this before, now we're this far, and now we're just finding this out when we explore your site more. So we had to work through those details and change the agreement up a little bit to reflect that.
Kim? Oh, let's see, did I miss somebody? Lisa. And then Kim.
Okay,
And then-
so I have a couple of questions. So is the reason that that Richmond is subsidizing the trips, the other $17, is because, is that how much it costs from Richmond to Martinez? Can they go anywhere else out of the service area other than to Martinez?
Only within our service area, and we're extending that service area to Martinez, to just two locations in Martinez, the Veterans Hospital and Regional Hospital there.
So is there any trip then that would cost a rider more than the $3 that they have to pay?
To the Martinez area, yes, but again, that would, if we're covering $17, we already explored this, so if we're covering $17 one way, we do show that we're able to, our subsidy would cover that for them.
Okay. My second question is, so then are there different hours for the clients that are using Lyft, because they're 24/7, versus someone who's in a wheelchair, visually impaired or hearing impaired, and is using the Richmond van service? Is that different service hours than the Lyft hours?
Yes, we're going to stick with our existing service hours for that. Unfortunately,
Which are?
8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, excluding holidays and excluding weekends.
And does the service with the Richmond vans also go out to the Martinez location?
No, they will not. No.
Okay, so I kind of have a problem that there's two different services that are serving different clients, one for different hours and two for different locations, because it seems like just because I'm visually impaired means I need to use the Richmond van service, but if I need to go to Martinez, I can't use that service to go. But if I can get in and out of a vehicle, I can use Lyft, and then I can go to Martinez, and I can go 24/7.
Well, let me just say this, that the visually impaired and the hearing impaired can choose to use Lyft if they want. I mean, that's an option that they have. Unfortunately, for the power wheelchairs, Lyft does not have the vehicles for power wheelchairs. And so that's why we're continuing our service, so that we continue to hire, to support that clientele.
But it's much more difficult if you're visually or hearing impaired, because you have to use a cell phone to access the Lyft ride.
Mm-hmm.
So that means someone else is going to, that involves a second person who could do that, because you can't see the phone, and presumably we can't hear the phone. So,
Well, a lot of times, people who are visually impaired, from my experience in Richmond, is that they have assistants, and so their assistants could assist them with scheduling rides and things like that. They're not required to use our service. They can still sign up for Lyft. But the reason that we said that we would continue our service, our transit service for them, is because we didn't want them to feel left out of anything. We wanted them to feel that like they had that option as well. So we left that window open for them. Basically it's that they can still be clients of our transit service, or they can sign up for Lyft.
okay, my last question is there a timeline for how the rest of the new service with Lyft is going to roll out that we could see? And if you have any estimates for the number of people that would continue using the van service versus the clients that would use the Lyft service, and is there a budget? Because we're now looking at, we have the 17-18 claim, we're going to be looking at the 18-19 claim presumably sometime soon, and I would like to see some actual numbers and timelines for how the service is going to be rolled out for the new Lyft program.
Okay, so we say you want to see dates or something like that in terms of how Well, I mean, that may be a challenge to give you dates right now, because right now we're still working through a travel training process with our clients. And as I mentioned, we have community-based nonprofit organizations who will be working have some hands-on training for our clients as well. It may be kind of a challenge to kind of tell you that, okay, yeah, by this month, June, July of 2019, we're going to have everything rolling. Everybody will be in the Lyft vehicle, going wherever they want to go. One thing I didn't want to do is rush this for our clients, because then I would feel like they would feel like no one's really spending time with them to really show them the program so they get familiar with the program.
I understand that, but my concern is there's more than $1 million on the table for Richmond's program for 18-19, and we're now in March of 18, so we have March, April, May, and June. There's 4 months left in this fiscal year, and we don't know what Richmond's program is going to be. We don't know when it's going to be fully rolled out, and I think it wouldn't be fair to this committee to see a claim for 18-19 that's for over $1 million when the biggest part of the program, which is the Lyft program, hasn't even been rolled out yet, and we don't know what the budget for it is. That's my concern.
Where did you get $1 million?
Well, because in 17,
Are you looking at, because part of the money is coming from the city, are you counting that?
yes, total. Okay, so if you want to go back to the Measure J program 15 money, it's $592,145 estimated for fiscal year 18. So presumably there's going to be at least that much money in Measure J, and then $239,902 or more from the WIC tax side of it. So that's $850,000 or something like that. So there's enough money on the table that since we're already in March, it concerns me that we don't have anything for 18-19 yet, and then a claim is going to come in with estimates for a program that hasn't started up yet for these same amounts of money. That's my concern.
Well, you do actually have claim form for 18-19. We submitted that, but I did ask Peter to hold off on that, because we too wanted to kind of see how the program rolled out. But, Peter, you may want to elaborate on this some more, but I did have him hold off on submitting that claim for any review, because we wanted to see how the program will unfold. But this is not, when you're in a transition process like this, it's not as simple as saying, oh, by this day we're going to have this in place. We want to make sure that we go through a travel training process with our clientele, existing and new, to make sure that they are comfortable with it first. Okay. That may not answer your question, but.
Kim, did you have? No, actually, that was my answer. Oh, okay. Anybody, or I do have one, but go ahead.
Is the travel training for how to use Lyft?
The travel training is how to use Lyft, and even it goes further than that. We're going to, because we have new clients that are coming in that may not have experienced our current service. So the travel training will be for all of our clientele, whether they use our city service or the Lyft service.
So city service means fixed route?
The city service means on demand.
The Our Transit?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Does the Our Transit continue for everyone?
The Our Transit will continue only for the clients that I mentioned.
Okay.
Okay.
The thing I wanted to first mention is I have a friend who's visually impaired, in fact, totally blind, and he rides Lyft, and the way he does it is by using GoGo Grandparent, and he has been trained how to use his smartphone. He has a smartphone, and he does use it, and manages to take trips. The problem with GoGo Grandparent is price.
I concur.
So that limits what he does.
Because we looked into GoGo Grandparent as well, and the price is very, very expensive, and we knew we just could not afford that, and would not want to put that burden onto our client. So, but other than that, I think they're a really good service.
So I don't know that I did this calculation right, but I was just wanting an estimate of, so if you take the number of rides that you allow, which was either 20 or 40, I forget, per person?
It is 40.
40 times, I think I used $20 as
Do I need my calculator?
how much you would pay. And then times, that came up with 800. And then I said, some reason I multiplied that by 500. I forget what that number was about, but came up with $400,000 that it would cost to run this.
You came up with what?
$400,000. I don't know if I did that.
That is our contract amount with Lyft.
I got it exactly.
Yes, you did.
How do you like that? Pretty good.
Very good.
Anyway, so that'll leave the rest of the money for the other needs of the agency related to providing paratransit rides.
Correct.
Okay, and I just wanted to say those two things. The how will Lyft know that somebody's gotten to their allocation of rides, or how will you know, or how will they know this is one of those rides?
According to the Lyft service, every client will have a partner code. So when they register, Lyft has a partner code, a code specific to that client.
Do all of their clients for everything have those codes?
I don't know. I'm just going by the paratransit service.
We can continue.
Yeah. So basically they have I don't think so. I think it's a partner code only for this particular service.
Mm-hmm.
So they also receive notices when they're close to 40 rides in that month. They receive notices that the rides are like maybe 30. You have 10 more left. So they receive notices to let them know. But we did base information on the number of rides our clients currently take to date, and a lot of them don't even use 40. They don't even do 40 rides a month. But should they go over 40 rides a month though, then that would be on them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that. So what are you assuming? I forget how I did my calculation almost. How much are you assuming an individual ride cost on average that got you to 400,000?
Well, we looked at the service. Okay, so within that service area, let's say within our service area, our average ride is probably like maybe $6-7. But to our client, it's $3 one way. So, and we'll subsidize up to 17. Now we may even spend the full 400,000 because it just depends on where they go in the service area, what that cost is to the city, especially for Martinez rides. So I would assume that whatever calculation you came up with, you got 400,000. That's what we had.
You did the same one.
Yeah.
Probably.
But
okay. So they have to give the partner code when they take a ride to get this deal. That's how that works.
Sorry.
So when one of your riders wants to use this system, they'll go on to their cell phone and
they'll register with Lyft.
Okay, so after they've done that, if they want to take a ride, what they do is they go on to Lyft, I guess.
They go to the Lyft app.
I'll call it the special Richmond Lyft app. I don't know which it is, but it doesn't matter. And they'll enter their data about themselves, and does that keeps track of how many rides they've had?
It will keep track of how many rides they have, yeah. That's because their telephone number is associated with either credit card or ATM card or prepaid card is associated with their partner code.
And you can change that credit card.
If you change, you can change it any time as long as you put it in the system. But they'll have that information, and when they have that, they'll know how many rides you've taken, that client has taken in a month.
Because it's all based on the partner code.
It's all based on the partner code that individual has.
And so do you have any plans in the future for what some people call equity, which is for the people who are unable to use the system?
Well, I can say I always have plans. Why not? That was one of my major concerns with the Lyft program, and Uber certainly didn't have a system that would allow us flexibility like Lyft. And one of the problems that I had was that, they didn't serve, power wheelchair clients. I did ask that question, and I'm still asking, and they're saying that maybe in the future, there's something that they're looking into as well. So maybe in the future, they'll do something really, really fast to, support this, especially since they know they're dealing with disabled and senior clients. I'm hoping.
Are you the first that you know of in the universe of such things to do this sort of a system?
No, there's other cities in Southern California. There are definitely cities up in the Bay Area that are looking at Richmond. They're hoping that they can kind of replicate what we do. I told you I wish that we had been following another city because it's been a challenge, trust me. But a lot of cities are looking up to Richmond, and I'm looking up to Richmond, to make this a success. And I'm thinking that one of the things that we could do in the future, perhaps, is you're going to maybe contracting out with a really good service outside of Lyft to support the wheelchair clients, the wheelchair patrons that we have, and to make sure that we can, serve them and that there will be a 24-hour service for them. Unfortunately, we don't, Lyft doesn't offer that. The cities never offer that, But anything is better than what we have or had.
If you were looking at improving providing some more equity, you could call it, for people in the three categories of disability, perhaps one of the things that would do that would be extending the hours. And my guess would be that the way that people would like it extended would first include the weekend, and you could almost say a little bit later on during the weekday, because if you can't leave until 8:30 and you have to get back by 5, there are a lot of things that it's really hard to do. So it makes it impossible to use the service and actually get something done within those hours. For really local things, like, for example, to go to Martinez, I don't know what the restrictions are on that, to go to Martinez, but I don't know how you could go to Martinez and do something.
Well, I'm thinking that with the assistance of our community-based organizations who will be contracted out by the city through another funding source, that provide the travel training works really well for those who may be qualified to, who have Class B licenses, or some community-based organizations that have drivers that are Class B licensed. Then we can kind of use them for travel training and for assistance. This is the travel assistance that we need.
I'm just talking about if the rules say you can't leave until 8:30 a.m. and you only have, I don't know how many vehicles you have for wheelchairs. How many do you have?
Well, it's going down from 10 to 2 because we only have 2 drivers.
If you only have 2, then only 2 people can do that, or 4, depending on how many. But it looks like your wheelchair vans maybe only hold 1 wheelchair.
We have the ability to kind of remove, chairs inside for at least 2 wheelchair clients. Yes.
So you could
we can get 2. Yes.
Okay, and then just fewer ambulatory.
Yes.
So it's just very hard to make that. It's hard to make the mechanics of making that trip are almost impossible if you do it that way. Now there are intermediate solutions, you might say, such as taking the person to the fixed ride vehicle that is accessible already by law, and that goes to Martinez. There is such a thing. So I think I've never done it, but I think the mechanics of it just involve taking them to the bus stop. And there are a few spread throughout West County, I know. It's run by, blanking on their name, Westcat.
Well, that's definitely something we can check into. Like I said, we have so many different phases of this, and it's a learning curve even for the city of Richmond, But I know that we had to do something because where we were 2 years ago or 3 years ago was not good.
So,
we didn't have our clients were not being served. We had drivers that were out. I think I reported that on numerous occasions. We had drivers that were out. We really couldn't offer a service to our clientele. And I just felt that was unfair to all of our patrons.
Right, but it's still unfair to those in those three disability categories.
Well, let me say this.
Probably close to being the most in need of it.
Well, let me just say this. That if we had we not changed the service, it would still be the same. We would still be offering the service that we have now for all of our patrons, including the wheelchair, visually impaired, and all of that. And it would be a poor service, because we would not be. But now we can have more attention.
I'm just talking about ways to provide equity. If you could look towards Charlie Anderson and try to set something up. I mean, where somebody goes to a bus stop. I mean, if you go on a lot of the paratransit service that would do the same trip, say from my city, you would be dropped off at some transfer point anyway. So it's, you can get quite a ways with.
I'm not saying we're not going to look at those different options. I'm not saying that we're just going to just leave our, wheelchair clients or visually impaired and all the other disabled. That we're going to forget about them. We're not going to forget about them. We're going to continue the service that we have and find out ways in which we can improve on that for.
So I would suggest that you try the one that I just suggested.
What is the name of that again?
Charlie Anderson from Westcat.
Okay.
He's the one, right? Does anybody else know? I've never actually ridden that particular service.
Well, the dollars have to make sense too.
This is public transit we're talking about.
Oh, you're saying so you having the service where we drop off near Westcat and then they pick up Westcat. Well, we can probably do that now if it's in our service area.
That's right, you could.
So that's not going to be a big, we would do that now. I mean,
but people don't understand that and know that. So you could do it in that form. Maybe by talking to Charlie, you can make some special accommodations for those people who need them on those vehicles.
Well, that's where the travel training comes in. And that's where they're working hand in hand with our clients and letting them know these are the different.
So I don't want to hog this whole session, but that would be an example of how you could start to provide equity and service for other people at probably very minimal cost.
I do want to say that right now, for all of our clients, if it's in our service area, if they need to transfer to another service within our service area, and that happens quite often, then they can do that now. We do that now. We work closely with other transit providers right now.
So you could work with Martinez too, because there is service to Martinez.
Yes.
From Richmond.
Yes.
I can't say I've ridden it, but mostly because I don't have a need to go to those locations. But anyway, so are there some more questions or comments? Yes. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that you do have to have a smartphone.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Or a tablet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you have a computer?
No, it's the tablet or the smartphone.
Lisa?
So my question is on the travel training. So I think you mentioned that you're going to be working with some community organizations to do that. So have those been identified? I know you have the workshops for the enrollment scheduled this month for the clients who want to learn about the new enrollment and answer questions about the cell phones, et cetera. But is the travel training schedule known yet? Because once they're enrolled, then they'll need to have the travel training to get familiar with how to do it.
Right. Some of our clients have used Lyft before or Uber, so they're familiar with the process. Especially on the weekends if they use it to go to church, or maybe sometimes they even use it to come to some of the city council meetings. But when we're talking about the ones who don't have that type of experience, we're going to work with them hand in hand, side by side. Our community-based organizations will, to assist them with their travel needs. Now, you mentioned if have they been identified? We have identified them, yes. It's the men and women of valor. It is Richmond Pal. And it is Friends of Greater Faith, I believe. Those are the three organizations that will be working with our clients. And they have had experience with outreach, and we have a mix, because Richmond Pals, you kind of wonder what do they have to do with seniors, but we're mixing this with also our transportation, division, and our needs for around bicycle share, around electric vehicle charging stations, around senior transportation. So they're doing it all. And the Richmond Pal is in there because they'll be working more with our youth, but they'll do some cross training with our seniors.
What about disabled people?
Seniors and disabled, all that's included.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about people who maybe aren't, are just plain disabled.
Yeah.
Not seniors.
No, I said seniors and disabled.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that word. I'm sorry. Okay.
So the Lyft rides, are they available to a hair appointment, a bridge, a social?
If it's in our service area, yes.
I have a question just about the handouts here. So this one, it looks to me like it's this is what somebody on the back would sign in order to register for use, right? And then I see this other document that has a really great program overview, service area, eligibility criteria, all that. So what is the purpose of the survey on the back of this document?
We want to know who feels comfortable with taking a Lyft service, who have taken it before. If you don't feel comfortable, we certainly want to know who that client base is, so that we can know that Mr. Lewis, for example, Mr. Lewis needs more hands-on-hands training. And so those questions will help us to decipher that and determine that.
I think I'm confused, though, because this survey is not part of where they're registering for the service.
This right here is a waiver of liability. They're required to sign this waiver because the city is no longer going to be responsible for, we have contracted out with Lyft. Lyft has to have insurance, so Lyft will be responsible for any type of damages or accidents and things like that. So they're required to sign this waiver. This right here, this form right here, it talks about our service area on the front, how to register, it gives them step-by-step instructions, and on the back, it has questions for us for the city to kind of determine what type of user, and if that user feels comfortable with taking the service. So it asks questions, am I a registered Paratransit client? And then check anything that would apply. Are you ambulatory, visually impaired, non-ambulatory passenger? So it goes on to various questions all the way down to the last one. It says, would you like our transit staff to provide you additional information and forms? So this just helps us to kind of find out what type of clientele we're working with, or for more individualized training. Help us to put this in the database, particularly the Measure J claim form, so we have something to give in Measure J for tabulating how many clients we have, how the service is working, pros and cons of what we're hearing and what we're doing to resolve any complaints should we get them. And maybe it could just be all great things that's happening. Maybe we won't get any complaints. Maybe it's all about how much they're loving the service.
So if they're getting into the service online, how do you get the piece of paper from them? Or is it online?
It's online, but we also mail them a copy of this entire application, and the waiver has to be turned in before they even get a partner code. They need the waiver.
Oh, so do you assign partner codes?
No. The waiver has to be turned in. Once the waiver is turned into the city, we forward information to Lyft, and Lyft there assigns a partner code.
Okay. Any more questions, comments? And have you actually started providing real rides? Or you know what I mean by, in other words, somebody gets in the car and goes somewhere, that type?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you actually, so I understand there's all these startup issues, but have you actually gotten far enough into this, to the use of the system so that people can actually get in a vehicle and take a ride from point A to point B? And if you already started, when was that?
We're not at that point yet. We hope to be really, really soon. I mean, like I said, I would love to fast track it, but there's a training process that we need to go through. We need to, especially for our existing clients, because I don't, to me, it's like when I talk to the existing clients, I know to a certain degree there's a little bit of fear, a little hesitation. They're used to one type of service. We've got to take it really, really easy and kind of, gradual with them. And once I feel that they feel comfortable, I think that it's going to be a transition period that's not going to just happen all at once for everybody. It may be some of those who can just transition right away because they've taken Lyft before. Then there may be others who need to be more, handheld, just kind of go through that process. So we're continuing our existing service until all of this kind of transitions. We're not just leaving them cold. Our transit service is still operable until people feel comfortable. We find that a large number of our clients have shifted over to Lyft. They've been informed. We're informing a lot of them right now of what we're transitioning, to or from.
Yeah, I guess what I'm really wondering is what, for the first people who are going to be actually using, getting rides this way, when do you think that will be? Like this month, next month? Or it didn't already happen, I guess, or you would say that date.
For example, I can't say that, we're going to have 100 clients move right over to Lyft.
I just wanted to know when client one would be doing it.
Just what?
When client number one. When it.
Well, let me just say this. That client number 1 through 10, and it could be more. I can come into my system and check. Have already started using Lyft.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can provide those numbers in the revised, 18, 19 that I give you, Peter. Okay. This is one reason as to why I asked Peter to hold off, because we want to know how many. But I don't want to give you a low number. They're going to be low at first because we're transitioning people into this new system.
I wasn't actually asking that question.
Oh, okay.
I was asking the question of when it, when the, I guess you could say when Southwest starts its new airplanes going to Hawaii, they have a date that it starts on, and it doesn't mean that everything is up and running for everything they're going to do in Hawaii, but they can say that, I think it happened like this last weekend maybe, because it was on TV. But so it has already started.
Well, this has started a month ago. So basically, we're just transitioning, clients into this new system, which is one reason as to why we're, needing the assistance of community-based organizations, because we want individuals to feel comfortable with the service and transitioning from one, service to another, and any questions that they may have, any kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So are there any other questions, or do we want to finish this item and move on? Michael?
Just briefly to kind of support what you were saying earlier about that there is fixed route from Richmond into Martinez because of the WestCat system. It's a lot more expensive, but the Richmond BART station does have an Amtrak connection. And there are multiple trains per day going back and forth to the Martinez Amtrak station. What I need to know is whether that's very friendly for people in wheelchairs, because I know that it's supposed to be accessible. And you would have to have money because it would be the Amtrak fare. It's not just an inexpensive ride. Do you know anything, Janice, about?
I ride it all the time.
So Amtrak is.
Not so much to go to Martinez, although sometimes it's to Martinez.
Right.
But I often ride to usually Sacramento.
Okay.
Or when I go to visit my daughter, I ride it. I ride it to Martinez and transfer onto an Amtrak bus.
Okay.
But but I do know that there are buses that go from there to the
VA and
the VA and what's the other one? County
there's
Hospital.
the county hospital, yeah.
And it's my understanding, and I've seen the bus stop signs, that you can find bus stops throughout West County that are WestCat bus stops where you can get on a bus, a little bus, and or maybe it's big now, I don't know, and it takes you to those two places. That's what it does. I think it's called the Z. And so there are intermediate solutions, and those are not expensive. I believe, and I might be wrong on the number, for the disabled rate for, senior disabled rate, I should say, for Amtrak for that trip to Martinez is, I think, around vaguely $11 one way. But you can go on the WestCat service on a bus that goes straight there. I don't know how often it goes, but, I know it does. It's the way people who are not seniors and not disabled, well, actually the disabled can do it if they can get to the bus. Anybody can do it if they can get to the bus stop. So a little travel training on doing that might be what they need, and they could get this could be the ride to that bus.
And these are the various things that we'll have our community-based organizations work with on an individual basis. And so they'll, for example, one client may travel different from another. So we want everyone that we work with.
You could add this to the repertoire.
Yes.
And then you could enable, a bunch of people to do that trip that want to. I mean, not everybody wants to do those two trips. Only people going to those destinations.
Well, the purpose is having the most convenient, accessible, easiest travel without a lot of burden, Fastest, yes.
But do remember that you don't have equity. And so if you prioritize only those, then you're still leaving people in wheelchairs, people who are blind, and people who are hearing impaired behind. So
well, that's not necessarily true. I didn't want to say this, but we have what we call there's an agreement between Chevron and the city of Richmond. I wasn't going to mention this. I'm probably jumping ahead, but on this coming Friday, that committee is supposed to approve a certain dollar amount to put toward our paratransit services, and then that's the piece that we say we could use towards, towards our disabled clientele.
So I think we maybe finished item 6 pretty thoroughly, right? Which will help us with.
I think there's one more comment
piece?
at your.
Oh, the action. Okay.
Well, no,
Right.
for that. No, there's no action on 6. That's just an information item. In front of you all, you have a letter under a WCTAC letterhead, and that is, and I'll let.
So where is that on the agenda?
It's not. It's just at your desk. There should be a copy.
This is just more
there.
information.
It's more information, and I think Joanna wants to speak to it very quickly.
Right now?
But it's a meeting that she and I and John Nemeth had with the city manager of Richmond and Lori and some other staff from the city of Richmond regarding the lift service. And the letter basically represents kind of what we want to see go into the claim with addressing the lift service, but I'll let Joanna speak very briefly.
I'm being kicked under the table. Okay, all I want to say is that when WICTAC has been working really closely with the city ongoing, we did a study. We knew there were problems. These problems haven't gone away overnight. Lori's made it very clear that resolving these problems is going to take a while, and they're using Lyft, and they have 2 drivers, and they have a service area that they've outlined here on the map that covers from El Sobrante to Kensington to Richmond. So we went and sat down with Lori and her city manager, because the program's under the city manager's office, and we said, look, we want confidence that the program will roll out and people will understand it, and there will be a proper amount of time to get people on board. We understand that. We don't think smartphones are enough of an answer. We understand they suit some people. They don't suit all people. We know that if you only have 2 drivers, you're not going to provide that many trips, no matter what, visually impaired or anything. You're going to have to give a lot of denials. We know that if, I'm trying to think what else we addressed, the trip to Martinez actually isn't more than, it's going to exceed the amount that the $17 subsidy. I mean, we brought up all these things in an hour and a half. We sat with the city manager, and we don't have confidence that it's going to roll out tomorrow or July 1, and everyone's going to be able to get this trip. Who gets it? I don't know. The people with smartphones, the people who can get a hold of those 2 drivers, the people who've gone through the training and understand how to use Lyft and have a code. That's who's going to get this program. So I think when they come with a claim form from Richmond, they have to be very clear on who they can serve and who they can't. There's no mandate that they serve everyone, and no one ever said they could. They get $800,000 a year roughly in Measure J funds. I don't know. That's roughly, X number of trips. They'll tell us. But we are in no way under the impression we want an answer back to this letter from the city telling us answers. Who can you serve and when can you start serving them? How are you going to outreach them? And how are you going to tell people that they can't be served if they don't have a smartphone or for whatever reason? So we're not going in with our eyes closed and naive. We are fully aware, we, WICTAC staff, are fully aware of what limitations there are to this program. I think when the city of Richmond comes with their claim form, they need to be fully transparent, clear, and give confidence that they can do X and they can't do Y and Z right now, but they want to do Y next year and Z the following year. That's it.
Well, we certainly don't have a problem with doing that. And like I mentioned to WICTAC earlier, that this is new for the city as well. You shouldn't be so hard on us because we have come. Let me finish. Because we've come a long ways to even get to this point where we didn't have any drivers at all. When we didn't have any drivers, you wouldn't say anything there. When we didn't have any drivers to even drive for the service, when we lost every driver that we had that was on a disability, you didn't say anything there with tech.
So anyway,
we want to argue with you, Lori.
It's not a place to argue about this. Anyway, I think that's the end of the item. I have one more thing to share, but I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for general comments because it really is more than just this.
Else?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there's no action then?
No, it's information.
So the only action says to. Oh, I'm reading from the wrong place. Excuse me. So then we need to go to item number 5,
Correct.
which is Richmond still. And this is the fiscal year 17-18, which is the year ending June of 18. Measure J, Program 15, claim approval. And so you have that form in front of you, or at least you should, as well as it was in the packet.
It was in the packet. We didn't hand that out separately to all of PCC, just the
Oh, okay.
But it's in the
anyway,
packet.
it was in the packet. If you have the packet, on page, starting on page, it's section 5, page 5-1. That's where it starts, actually. This there is supposed to be an action on. And Peter, do you want to introduce this, please?
So the subcommittee met prior to the meeting today. It also met prior to the last meeting, and we held the item over until this meeting because the subcommittee came up with questions they submitted to Richmond. Richmond provided answers to those questions, which the subcommittee reviewed today. And the subcommittee, after a long discussion, has elected to not make a recommendation to the PCC, but to have that discussion with you all and see if we can come up with a recommendation. I think I said that correctly. Lisa Hammond and Janet Abelson and Michael DeGelli, were part of the subcommittee that met today, and I will let them kind of introduce to you the discussion they had regarding the 1718 claim, and they can potentially recommend a motion or something regarding that.
Anyone can, right?
Yeah, anybody on the PCC now, it's open for PC discussion.
Right, because if it's
Right.
limited,
I thought those of you that were involved in the discussion pre-meeting that you could
Right, so why
kind
don't
of
we
introduce that, and then anybody on the PCC can make a motion as
Why
to
don't
how
we
to move
start
the
by
item
having since there's only 3 members of the committee, have the members of committee say what they want to say about that. Do you want to start, Lisa?
So at the subcommittee, I just had some questions about the service that had been provided in the claim form that's in this agenda item, so 1718. And also that in order to try to correct some of the issues that Richmond had in 1718 with drivers, et cetera, that we get information on the 1819 program so that we know it's moving in the right direction, and we have information about how the LIFT program is going to work and how it's going to be rolled out, and then what's going to be provided by the 2 remaining vans in the Richmond fleet. And because I think it's important that if you have a year where you have challenges, that you have some solutions to those challenges, which I know Richmond's working on with the LIFT program and with supplementing it with the Paratransit program. But my motion in the subcommittee of just Janet and Michael and myself was that we wait to approve the 1718 claim until we see the 1819 claim, which was due that was already due. Okay, so we haven't seen it yet. But as soon as we saw the claim and could see how the program was rolling out for 1819, that then we would take both of the claims at the same time, 1718 and 1819. But that didn't get a second, so that was my motion in the subcommittee.
Michael?
And then just one thing that was clarified when we had that meeting is that the figures that are on page 5.5, they go actual projected estimate. Well, that was a form that was created a few years ago, and so actually those numbers can now be seen as those are the actual figures. Is that correct? So that when you go through the thing and you look at it, this is just the reason it's worded this way is because it's a copy of the form that was made a couple years ago. So now that the top of those, you'd cross it out and just put those are the actual figures that you're going to be dealing with for this for the back claim.
I agree with that 99%.
Oh, okay.
The middle column, which is fiscal year 2017 projected, and I looked it up, that's why I brought my computer in, the first row, Measure J, Program 15, the actual number should be 572,474. And the second column, Measure J, Program 20, should be, I did it wrong. Sorry. Anyway, it's a bigger number than that. It's an additional, and I closed it already. Maybe I didn't look that one up appropriately. So the additional number would basically be about 250,000. I'll just say that that's fairly close. And the reason that is at the time they filled out this form, the actual money that the city of Richmond had received is on here, but they were, we hadn't paid the full year at that point. So now we have paid the full year for 2017, so those numbers are actually bigger. And then I think what would happen is that the city general fund money would be lowered closer to the 410,000, which would be typical of what the general fund would pay. So the two revenue numbers would just offset. There would be more Measure J and less city general fund would offset that.
Could you?
The total program sources at the bottom of that first section, which is 1,108,575, would stay the same. And the total program uses 1,108,575 would be the same. Those are the actual numbers. It's just a difference in the revenue sources. One would go up and one would go down a little bit to compensate for that, the same amount.
So, and could you repeat those numbers again?
Well,
because I didn't have, or
give me a few minutes and I'll look up the
okay,
actual one
that's
for the
fine.
second row.
Or even just mailing it out a different time would be okay.
Yeah.
Also, would that be easier on you?
I might have it open. No, I don't.
If we could just get a corrected sheet, maybe
Yep.
for that page.
Yep.
That's all it would be. Sent by email, say. So how much is still owed for fiscal year 2017 by the authority to Richmond?
Nothing. So
It's all paid?
So the actual number for the second row, which is Measure J Program 20, is $241,397. So that's been fully paid.
So there's,
So fiscal year 2016-2017, Measure J allocations are fully paid,
okay.
which is not what was reflected here, but now they are fully paid.
Because time has gone
Correct.
on. Okay, and then on 2018 estimate, that's still the same, that number on this page?
Yeah, that's the estimate, correct.
Okay,
That number has not been approved
okay.
by either the PCC or the board.
So in dealing with the item at hand, is one of the issues releasing some of that money?
Correct.
So, and the reason for that is if you look at the agenda, it says this is the 1718 claim approval, which is done after the end of the period, right? Is that right?
The 1718 approval should have been, a claim should have been received for that in April of 2017. It should have been approved in June of 2017 by the authority to go into effect July of 2017.
Okay. And so the approval, if we approved this form, or when we approved this form, then theoretically that's when we would release that money, but we've already released
So
it?
we have not released
We have not released it.
2017-18. So if you approve the 2017-2018 funds, that would go to the planning committee and the board at the next opportunity, which would be April, I think. We could still make April. And then those funds would be immediately sent to the city of Richmond. Or there could be direction to go ahead and have the board approve them, but release them under different conditions or circumstances. That's viable as well.
Okay, and then on the 2018, the third column, it's too early for that, right? Or is that still?
That's the money we're talking about, 2018.
The third column.
Correct.
Okay, and that hasn't been released at all?
Correct. Has not been allocated
there's
it has not been allocated by the
A full
authority.
year plus a partial year? Partial year being fiscal year 2017?
No, that's been fully paid.
I'm sorry.
That's off the table.
That's off the table. So
Yep.
the only thing we're talking about is fiscal year 2018.
Correct, column 3.
Okay. And nothing there has been paid?
Correct,
Okay. So that's the heart of the issue at hand?
correct.
Is that one number? Okay.
Yes.
Lisa?
Sorry. But I just noticed something else which is interesting under program uses, under the expenditures, that general administration for 17-18 is almost $628,000. Paratransit operations is just about $395,000. And yet half of the trips were provided between 17 and 18, 7,600 trips in 17 and 3,683 in 18. And so I have a hard time with the numbers basically staying about the same, but half of the trips being provided. So I don't know. I guess I just noticed that.
So we've had several discussions with the city on this over the years, and what they do, and it's an accounting thing, I guess. What they do is the way their city does its allocation of citywide overhead, you know, the city manager or the city manager's office and the city attorney and all that stuff, is they allocate that out to all of the what they call enterprise programs, which paratransit is considered because it receives revenues through fares. And so that is why the city has historically provided general fund money. They charge that to all the programs. That comes out under the general administration line. Like half of that is this allocation to city overhead. Am I right so far? And then they theoretically cover that with the general fund. So it's not actually being charged to the paratransit program itself. This is one of those cases where we tried to simplify the forms, and this is one of those weird situations where, you know, it makes it hard to explain in this situation because the other cities don't do it that way.
Anything else? Lisa, are you finished? You do have something, or you don't? No. Okay. Anybody? Michael, you were going to say something, right? Pardon? You already spoken. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, please.
Yeah, Madam Chair and to Peter, just so that I know where we are and I'm keeping up with this. FY 2018, that's for fiscal year 17-18, correct? And they have not been paid any of that money to date. If we say we'll approve this and it can go to the board in April, you're going to pay the city of Richmond this amount of money, the $1,022,820. That's correct. And
no.
Just the Measure J program 15 funds.
Correct. The PCC has jurisdiction over the program 15 funds. The program 20 funds with that has jurisdiction over that.
Okay, then I got two more questions there. The 592-145 funds, we're 3 months shy of the fiscal year ending.
In this case, 17-18, the fiscal year has ended 6 months ago. It ended June 30th, 2018.
Oh, we're in 2019. Okay, well, yeah, then that's my question. How and what are these funds going to be used for?
They would be used for paying the service that's described in the rest of this. In the first few pages, there's a description of the services. that are intended to be paid for using those funds.
So my next question is, how can the city of Richmond or any other agency, city or agency for that matter, how can they adequately plan what they're going to do if they're constantly 18 months behind the ball?
Well, I think in this case they shouldn't be. Typically, we provide the funds, and this is the whole point of we do this projection, and then we get a board approval in June so that we know what funds we're going to provide starting July 1st, and that's the year of service. So what the city of Richmond has been doing is subsidizing their program with general fund money until these get approved, because they're late in the approval process, in the claim process.
Final question. From my perspective, and so that I can try to understand this, when should these projections, when should they have been made and submitted for approval?
So 17-18, which is the year that we're looking at, should this claim form should have been submitted, and I don't remember the exact date, but around like the middle of April, towards the end of April of 2017. And then we would bring those to the PCC in May of 2017. Then they would go to the authority board in June of 2017, so that a resolution is in place for starting July 1st.
So to add on to what you're saying,
window.
When did they come? Because they did come earlier, right,
Come earlier?
than today?
They came earlier than today, yes. When? I'd have to look back at the email. I don't remember. So we looked at it, our last meeting
4 months ago?
was not January, it was November. So it was probably October, I'm guessing, of 2018, yeah.
Oh, it was turned in, which is
We
different.
probably
than our
got it
meeting
turned
date,
in
probably.
October, and then we
Did it in November.
We did it in November
That
at
was
the
when we
PCC.
met.
That was the first time.
But that's different than
Yes.
the date turned in.
Right.
So if I could just interject a thing here about format of this form. Everyone's, I think, struggling with this fiscal year with one number. If we could have it with like 17, 18, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
I think it would help
we'll
us a
adjust
lot.
it for.
And I made a comment earlier at the subcommittee meeting about a similar issue regarding the date. And in fact, the date of this is on here at the beginning, theoretically, and in the wrong place. Anyway, it does show a date, but apparently it doesn't move. The date doesn't change when it gets revised. If this isn't, what kind of a document?
Yeah, I
is
see
this?
so up on the first page, 5-1 in your book? There is a date, 6/4/2018. So that's probably when it was filled out.
Yeah, so if we could still have the date it was, received here or something, so that that would help with our confusion also.
Okay.
And then we would know where we are in terms of those three columns.
Right.
Which is what our confusion, okay. So do you have anything to add to it? That's it? Okay. How about anybody else? Do they want to make any comments? Questions still in understanding what happened or will be happening? Okay.
Okay, so I just want to add that the claim form for 2017-18 had been turned in, as Peter acknowledged, and the one reason as to why we moved to lifting them, not to go back to WICTAC again, but the reason we moved to looking at a lift service in the first place was because WICTAC suggested it. They knew that we had a poor, failing service. We knew that we had that. We're trying to find a way to deal with improving our service. And so WICTAC was like, why don't you just go ahead and look at Lyft? They've suggested they put us in touch with Lyft, and this is where we are so far. Joanna, yes, you referred me to Lyft. And so I'm saying that's the reason as to why we have the contract to this date. Thank you.
Okay, so oops, I'm having trouble finding my place. There it is. So what we're being asked to do here is to take an action, which is, should I get this right? Oh, so that's the claim form. So what is the action being asked of us specifically, Peter? Whether or not to approve that number?
Madam Chair, can I make a motion?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I would like to move that we, and I don't know, you have to tell me, Peter, if this is even feasible. I'd like to move that we pay 50% of the Richmond claim for 17-18. When we get, hopefully in the next, and I'd like to put a time frame on it, maybe in the next 45 days, we get a budget, we get a timeline, we get a schedule for doing the trainings for the riders, and we get as much information as possible on the program. And if that's the claim form for 18-19, that's fine. With that level of detail, though, not just the form, but detail about the budget, the timeline for when things are getting rolled out, the schedule for when the rider training is going to happen, and then we pay the remainder of the 50% of the 17-18 claim at that point, assuming that, you know, we're seeing progress being made in the current program. And the reason I'm saying that is because we're so far into the current year that we don't even know, and we're so far behind that we don't even know what's happening in a lot of detail for this next year for when the claim is going to come in. So to me, it seems reasonable. They've provided the service for 17-18. They're trying to make changes to move it forward, but let's give an incentive to then get additional information on the 18-19 program, whether it's in the actual claim form with some attachments or information in more detail than what we're seeing here. That's my motion.
So could you repeat this,
50% of the 17-18 claim to Richmond being paid now. Mm-hmm. The other 50% when we get, let's just say, when we get the claim form with backup that includes a budget, a timeline, and when the rider trainings are going to happen.
The claim form for what period?
18-19, because that should have been in a year ago.
At the beginning of 18-19. I think
prior to 18.
Well, 18-19 is due.
Okay, let me make sure I understand this. So you want to approve half and
Correct.
pay it, and then the other half is contingent on a report from Richmond that has detail. It doesn't even have to be their official claim, but it has some
form,
detail.
That you want?
But that form doesn't have detail, Janet, about your budget, your timeline for how things are going to get rolled out.
So do you want this?
Yeah, I think she's just wanting more detail, and we can make a list, and it can be part of that claim.
That's
so
fine.
it could even be the
could
official
be the claim
claim.
form. Yeah, it
To
could
save
be.
time.
So this
Sure.
form for the period 18-19,
Correct.
which was
And then as
due
soon as that's been seen by the
last April?
PCC and approved, we would then
Pay
the
the other
second
half for
half
17-18.
of 17-18.
Correct.
Plus, potentially, if it does come in an 18-19 claim, that could be approved at the same time.
Correct.
So maybe a better way to do that, just from a administrative perspective, would be that the board, because the authority still has to approve it, that the authority approve the full amount, but we only pay half, and then the other half is contingent on that, and then we wouldn't have to go back to the full authority. That would save us some administrative expense and time,
That's
I
fine.
think.
I didn't know how to word it so it would
Yeah.
work well within the,
Yeah.
that's fine.
That way, as soon as it's turned in, we could go ahead and pay the second half, and depending on the level that it's turned in, maybe it's a full claim, we could adopt that. Now, that additional 18-19 money would still go to the board, but in the meantime, we could pay the second half of the 17-18. Okay, just trying to understand your.
Are you, I'm a little confused what you're saying. So are you suggesting that, I got part of what you understood, but then the question I had was, this is March, right? So the 1920 claim is due next month?
For my motion, I'm not even talking about that.
Well, no, but I'm bringing into it this additional information. That
Right.
there's a new claim due.
Theoretically, they could bring that claim as well and be completely up to date, assuming there's enough detail that everybody felt comfortable with, and we'd be happy to work with Lori, you on making sure that all that detail's in there.
And maybe if that could be done as, realistically speaking, as one process in terms of the paperwork, then that would be helpful, I think, to those. So then it would go. That would go. So we would do this motion that said, and half of the money would go.
And I'm assuming the critical point you're making, Lisa, is a budget and a timeline with milestones. Now, they don't have to, the milestones can go beyond, you just want to see them on paper, a schedule of when they, okay.
Right, especially if the new year, and then we would have the committee review that, and, we'd get it back into its normal cycle.
Madam Chair.
And again, I think, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I've been wanting to say something.
Go ahead. Why don't you say it now?
Yes. Why would we want to withhold funds from 17-18, and those services have already been rendered, and when we should be concentrating right now, based on the timeline you responded to one of my previous questions, we should be working on 18-19 right now in order to get something to the board by April 1st.
We should be working next month on 1920. We're still a year behind on 18-19 because I feel because it was my motion. Can I answer the question? Because I feel
my point, before you answer the question, let me finish my point is that these services have been rendered, and if we continue to withhold funds pending on this amount of paperwork here, this report there, it seems like we're just pushing the can or the ball down the road, and we're never getting it to the goal line. We want to get to the point where we get caught up on a current basis so that the city of Richmond or any other locality can begin to comply on a regular basis when they're supposed to, and we don't have to continue to do this year after year after year, because we're, 2 years behind?
Is there any other paratransit provider that's 2 years behind, Peter? Okay. So, point made. So, my point is that if we don't put a stick on it this time, then I'm not comfortable knowing what's going to come up for 18-19, and I'm not comfortable knowing what's coming up with 19-20, because we're already a year behind on 18-19, and I don't know if 19-20 is going to come in, and I want to make sure we see those so we get them in a timely manner, because it's too hard even for the committee to go back and try to revisit what had happened and then try to fix it if there's more problems. That's the only reason. And if there were for me, as part of the PCC, if there were other paratransit providers that were this much in arrears, I would ask for the same thing. I'd like to see what the program is in detail going forward so we don't end up in this situation again.
So I think Lori was next, and then.
Well, first of all, this many claim forms behind because we changed our service up. And we had to see how the service was going to roll out. It was kind of a challenge to get claim forms in when we just are figuring out a service. So, I mean, everyone that's on this committee know from the time that we ever reported that we were changing and shifting the service from Paratransit to a contract with Lyft. This has been a long time coming, but you also recognize that where we were a year and a half ago with just the handouts I gave you, that we've made a lot of progress. Now, in terms of catching up on the forms, we don't have a problem with doing that. We can catch up on all the forms. We're just really waiting for this committee meeting to happen so that we can just turn in all the claim forms. Peter, you have a claim form for 1819.
If you want me to use that, I will.
Well, we said hold up for a minute. Okay. We said hold up because I want to see that once we roll out the...
Yeah.
So he has claim forms 1718 and 1819. He has those claim forms. We just have to... I want to share some things with him, some data with him, before we actually have him to present that to the board. But all of that is that we are actually caught up with our claim forms.
Well, I would suggest that your 1819 claim form should be revised to include all this new information.
I can revise it and give you what I have. It won't probably be satisfying to some of the board members. I wanted to really give some realistic numbers, but if you just want to put things in there just to put them in there, I don't agree with that. I'd rather have some real data, some real numbers to show, so that you can actually have some actuals there. But if you want me to give you some estimates, I'll be happy to do that, because that's all I'll be able to provide you with our estimates.
I think the most important thing is a budget and a timeline to give yourself some milestones, some calendar dates that you need to meet. Otherwise, things are tending to drag out.
Well, I want a substitute motion that the City of Richmond receives all of the allocated money of $592,145 with making those changes to the Measure J claim form. Subject to that. Thank you.
Can I back up a second? Was there a second to Lisa's motion? No. So you actually can't make a substitute motion because the motion, her motion apparently failed.
Okay.
So anybody in this room can make a new motion if they want. Yes?
I move that all the funds be paid for 1718. Is that the year we're talking about?
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
So, just to clarify again, sorry, technicality, as an advisory committee, the appropriate motion would be to recommend that the board approve the 17-18 fiscal year 17-18 allocation to the City of Richmond. And then the board would actually allocate those funds by resolution.
And you don't want to address the issues regarding the accounting at all?
Pardon me?
You don't want to address the accounting issues at all in your motion?
I agree with the gentleman across from me that these services have been rendered and they should be paid for. So I don't know the right verbiage, but thank you, Peter, for substituting the correct verbiage.
Did that already happen?
So again, I think what she was suggesting was that the whole 17-18 allocation she said paid, and actually what this, as an advisory committee, you would make a recommendation that the authority of board approve the 17-18 allocation, and then they would officially make that allocation.
Do you want to include that language?
Yes, please.
Do you want to put
yeah,
that in your second?
Yes, I'll accept that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that, no, I guess I'm not. I lost my thought. Okay, never mind.
So this item is just about the...
Yeah, 17-18 allocation, that's it.
Okay, so, okay, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to the question, do we just forget about the accounting issues? The answer to that is no. We've already heard that the 17, 18, and 17, 18, 19, and 20, they already have that, and they're just holding it to work on issues. So the accounting issues, can be, sorry about that. So the accounting issues can be addressed during those proceedings.
Well, if I remember correctly, the process on the claims is they come to the subcommittee of the PCC, and the PCC holds a discussion with each operator one at a time, and then make a recommendation about approving them, and then they come to the full PCC, and it makes a recommendation about approving them, and then it goes to the CCTA Planning Committee. Am I right there, Peter?
Yeah.
And then same thing, and then it goes to the full authority. This actually happens really quickly in time, but ultimately it's the full authority that approves it. So since it didn't get approved in the I think because it wasn't finished yet. Was that the reason? I think a specific reason. That process didn't happen, and it still hasn't been completed. So there's a sense in which it still hasn't been approved until the full authority board approves it. Because the reason Peter was wanting that language inserted is that actually is the process, and they are the ones with the authority to do the final approval. So it'll probably go to the next PCC meeting, which, assuming it's approved by this group,
I'm looking at dates right now.
it would be the first.
So it would be, we can still get it for April 3rd is the planning committee meeting.
And then the full
And so
authority
that agenda
meeting.
won't go out until Wednesday of next week, so we could put it together real quick. If the PCC decided to move it to the board, we could do that in April.
And which would be the third Wednesday of the month,
Correct.
without knowing what date that is. But anyway, that is the process.
So April 17th is the authority meeting.
So does the release of funds go along with that?
Yeah,
Assuming it's
we would-
approved?
So we would theoretically get the resolution signed that night, and then so we'd have to create a PO, and then once the PO is created, and I can't, commit to how long that would take. It just depends on how busy our accounts payable person is. But, within a few weeks. So certainly by, the first full week in May, we would be able to cut a check to the city of Richmond.
So that's the process that's in place. So we have a motion before us. Any further comment? Okay. So the motion was made by, I forgot who made the motion. Mary? Okay. And seconded by fellow. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition?
No.
Any abstentions? Motion carries with one abstention by,
No, I was a no.
oh, I'm sorry, one no vote. Okay, so thank you all for going through this, and I do hope in the future we'll see.
So Janet, for future agenda items, can we have the Measure J Program 15 claim form for 1819 and 1920 for Richmond on the next agenda?
Oh, to discuss it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if it's not available, we'll discuss that status or something. So if we put it on there in a way that we can do that. What I was going to sort of bring us back to on the claims form is if we could put the, like 1718-18 for a better understanding on our part. And also the date last modified as opposed to the initial date it was created, because that would be really helpful. And I don't know, I think those were the only suggestions like that in that category. So it's already 4:15, which is way past when we adjourn. So I would suggest that there aren't probably anything, there's nothing that couldn't wait until our next meeting. Does anybody, with one exception maybe, if Lori were able to get the forms in, well, you already have one form in, don't you?
We do. And
So we could have a meeting next month, right? Maybe? So what would that date be?
You know what, Chair, maybe, I mean, you can call a special meeting, and then we just have to, put notice out and everything. So maybe the best thing to do would be as soon as I get, Lori to say, yeah, let's go ahead and
Then we'll
submit
talk
that.
about a date?
Then we'll set the subcommittee meeting. We don't need, that's not scheduled. So we'll set the subcommittee meeting, review it, and make a decision there whether we need a special meeting, to quickly move it forward or not.
Okay. Does that work for you, Lori? Can you
it
do
does
that?
work for me. Like I said, 1819 is already done. We'll work on 19 and 20, have that done next month. We're ready. But just keep in mind that the numbers that we give you will not be actuals. They're going to be projections because,
That's why we have the
Okay.
column heading
all right.
that says that. So 1819 is what was due last year, right? Do I have this straight? I think I'm beginning to get these numbers. Okay, that was due last year. Okay, and then you'll be caught up, but then you've got it sort of starts all over again.
Right. Well, let me go back. He has 1819. Peter has that. But there were some things that we were holding off
some
on.
changes.
Yeah, we wanted
Okay.
to. The only reason he
Exactly
held
that.
off was because I wanted to give him actual numbers. But now there'll be projections for 1819. 19 and 20, there may be some projections as well.
Which is what
So-
that column heading says.
All right.
And
Okay.
I mean, the way, as it's
Projections,
stated now.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Because before the period starts, you couldn't possibly know for sure exactly what will happen ever. So thank you all for hanging in there. It's been a long meeting. Thank you. Bye.